and creativity can't really happen without conflict and without diversity. Unprecedented layoffs, particularly in the tech industry. And so I think people are really coming to terms with the fact that idea of like you graduate university, you get a job, you work there for life, that's continually challenged. It's not a guarantee. There can be a lot of noise, right? And so the signal has to come from inside. And my job is to help you find the signal, basically.
If you would introduce yourself to someone, meeting you for the first time, which we are, kinda, how would you introduce yourself?
Well, since this is a career-oriented
Yeah.
podcast, I'll
Yeah.
say my name is Heather Dobbin.
Mm.
I'm an executive and leadership development coach. I'm also a professional facilitator, and I create and facilitate programs that help people grow into their skills, particularly their human-oriented skills. I'm also a community builder, so I work a lot inside of particularly the Tokyo startup ecosystem
Mm.
to help people stay connected and supported and get all of the sorts of resources they need. So
Mhm.
that's my career in a nutshell. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. I
Mm.
moved to Busan, South Korea about 16 years ago, and I did that to teach English as a second language in Korean public schools.
Mhm.
I did that for about 3 years. I was an elementary school teacher, if you can believe it from my client profile now.
Mhm.
That was a lot of fun, and that gave me the bug to stay in Asia. After 3 years, I moved to Japan, and I ended up in Gunma Prefecture. And so there I was in charge of a chain of conversation schools and a publishing company out there. And a lot of what I did was similar to some of the things that I do now for executives, where it's like creating, training programs, curriculum, helping people really evolve. And I did that for about 5.5 years. And then, I really enjoy teaching and educational leadership. It's still a big part of what I do today when I create the training programs and workshops and things. Um, and, teaching English as a second language was a nice way to support people, but I wanted to do more. So I ended up becoming the director of programs for an IT engineering bootcamp here in Tokyo,
Mhm.
and which is very interesting because I'm not a software engineer, firmly a
Yeah.
humanities person,
Yeah.
and so somehow I ended up being in charge of teaching amazing software engineers how to be educators. And that was incredible. I did that for about 3.5 years. That caused me to move to Tokyo. And right before
So
the,
so all of this time you were in Gumma,
oh no, so
up and up until that stuff.
up until I started at the boot camp, I was in Gunma, and then I moved to Tokyo.
I
Yeah.
see.
And that was about a long time ago, like I'm not even sure.
How
And
long how long have you been in Japan though?
13 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Uh I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you.
No, I mean, there's more to tell, but we could talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh so this podcast is usually about the unexpected, events that happen during everyone's careers.
Mm.
We always think that you go to university, you graduate, you get a job, and it's like one, two, three, or like ABC, but it's rarely the case. There are always, hills and valleys that we have to, unfortunately or fortunately, to take these kind of detours in order to reach the stage or reach the point that we want in our careers. And it's like an ongoing process all the time. Like whoever I hear, whoever I talk to, they always have this kind of thing. For you, like I see like you graduated from Clayton State University, and then you went to Georgia State University for psychology and English literature. Uh, why did you? Why psychology? Because I was talking to Matt, and then I was really wondering, like, how does coaching and, psychology or therapy, no, that was Brandon, actually. Brandon. And I was wondering, like, how do they relate to each other? Like, is it like, because from the conversation that we had, it was quite similar. So you, having graduated from psychology, what's your take on this kind of thing?
Well, for that, I mean, coaching has its roots in a branch of psychology called positive psychology.
Mm,
So psychopathology is all about, how to heal mental illness, right? How to help people cope, how to help them
mm,
recover. And positive psychology got into the study of human potential, of what
mm,
makes us happy, what makes us fulfilled, what makes us challenge ourselves. And so
mm,
coaching really grew out of that. Um, that being said, because they are both rooted in psychology and psychiatry, there is a lot of overlap, right?
mm, mm,
And my original intention was actually to become a therapist. And then I went through some personal things, after graduating, and I was like, so I need to move to Korea.
mm. Yeah.
Uh, so that was an initiated surprise, an unexpected turn.
Mm,
But when I was working at the boot camp, and I decided that I wanted to do something, like I had just different experiences, and I wanted to get back to supporting,
mm,
human potential and growth in a more direct way than I was doing in my leadership position at the boot camp. I actually looked into becoming a therapist, and just, finishing that up. And then I learned about coaching, and I'll be honest with you. I had heard about life coaches before, and as someone who was trained in psychology, I was kind of skeptical. I was like, okay, what is that really?
mm,
Uh, but then I started to look into it, and I was like, oh, this is essentially like applied positive psychology. So that's great. I can really resonate with this. Let me check it out and see if I, fit with this. So I hired a coach.
mm,
Um, and it was extremely helpful for me. I was still in my leadership position at the time, and I can only say that I really wish I had hired a coach sooner, um,
mm,
because just the self-awareness and the relational awareness and the framework and the understanding that I brought to people, the improvement in my communication skills, my ability to regulate and manage my own stress immediately had a positive impact on me and my team and the way that I led. And, I had been figuring it out for years at that point. And then, like listening to podcasts and reading books and stuff. But having that person just accelerated my growth. And
mm,
so, and we talked about personal things too. It wasn't just about work stuff, which is a huge part of why I coach the way I coach now. Um, and so then I decided to get certified and trained, and that just led me even deeper into this. And I feel like the difference for me as I've become a more experienced practitioner is a therapist is there, and I also trained as a crisis line counselor, so I have done some counseling as well. And the difference there is that kind of thing. And again, it's very like some therapists will do a lot of coaching things as well.
mm,
Um, the goal of therapy or counseling or crisis management in this kind of a situation is to get someone to the point where they can cope, where what's going on inside of them isn't disruptive to their daily life and their relationships or a threat to themselves or others. And for coaching, it's like, okay, yes, coping is a part of it, but who are you? Who do you want to be? What's the alignment there? How do you want to have an impact on the world? It's very like values oriented and future oriented. Although
mm.
some coaches like myself, of course, like understand that who you are now has your roots in the past. So we will spend some time going there. So I'm not sure if that answers your question because if you it's not like therapy and counseling and coaching. It's more
Mm.
like this, right? Where
I
there is
I see.
a big overlap in the Venn diagram.
I also imagined that it would be, they intersect definitely, because, it makes sense. You're dealing with humans and you're basically helping them out. Uh, during this journey, like, what were the unexpected pivots that happened during, like, first of all, like graduating from psychology, and then you said like things happened and you decided to move to Korea. Can you share with us, if what was the direction? Like, well, why did you decide to move there and teach English, even though you studied literature, obviously,
Mm.
but what moving to a different country is usually a big decision, right? It's like you have your whole life and then you decide, okay, I'm done with this, I'm moving there. What happened there?
Well, I think external circumstances really kind of drove that as well. I
Mm,
graduated Georgia State.
mm,
It's sort of like the aftershocks of the Lehman shock. And
mhm,
so, I knew that I wanted to do something related to my field. And at that time, particularly where I'm from, Atlanta, the job market was just terrible. And so I was like searching, waiting tables in the meantime to like pay my rent, put food on my table, all of this stuff. And I was just like, I wasn't able to find anything. And I knew I wanted to take some time off before pursuing my PhD, because, yeah, university was really tough for me, not academically, but just personally. There was so much going on. And so I think I arrived at this point where I knew that there was something I wanted to do and more that I wanted to contribute, but I wasn't finding the environment that I was in to be particularly friendly to that. And so I was really stuck. And then, you know how like inspiration can come from very unexpected places. I was watching a movie called Revolutionary Road, which is very, very dark, and I recommend everyone watch it, but it's not for the the faint of heart.
okay.
And essentially, it's about how not following your dreams and living up to your potential can be like life-threatening. And I remember I was just laying awake at night, and I was like, I have to leave. I can't stay here. And I had been playing around with the idea of moving to Korea for some time, but it was a big decision, and I was like, no, like F it, I have to have to do it. And so yeah, I
Okay.
applied and was
Mm,
accepted, and I moved. And yeah, I wasn't expecting to because, like you said, I come from a pretty humble background. So going to university, I was the first person in my family to do that. And there was this promise of like, if you study hard and you get good grades, and you're a sociable person, like you'll get a good job. And I found that that just wasn't true in that
that's
labor
not the
market was.
case.
Not at all. And so it's
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I'm completely disillusioned. I have to
Yeah.
go do something totally different. And teaching is, part of supporting people and developing. So it wasn't too far off. But yeah, I was just like, okay, I have to do something else. And this is about as else as it gets,
Mm.
really. Yeah.
Why Korea?
Honestly speaking, it was the first thing I ran across because it was like Japan or Korea. I looked into it later and
Mm,
I just felt this really strong intuitive pull towards it.
mm,
I think probably because like, yeah, primacy effect. Oh yeah, this
mm,
seems like a great idea. And then you sort of like build up this romantic notion about what it'll be like. And then, like everything, you can get really attached to that. And I was pretty young when that happened too. So I'm sure there
mm,
was a little bit of that. But it was also just, I hadn't really traveled much at that
mm,
point, and it was so like foreign, just like completely different. And I was excited for that. So it was a place that I didn't know anything about, and I decided to move there. So,
mm. Does moving to an environment that is completely foreign to you, not knowing anything about, I mean, when did you say you moved there? What year was it?
ooh, 2000, maybe
10?
2010, 2010,
10,
yeah.
right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like the internet was not that great back then. I mean,
Yeah.
now obviously you have a lot more resources to know everything about what you need to know, but there would still be a little bit of mystery to moving to Korea, right?
Hmm.
How did that experience shape the person that you are right now? Kind of thinking on your feet. Did that happen quite a lot? Uh, One thing that I'll speak from my own experience after moving to Japan. I found it a little bit, and I think I hate this part, is that I had to depend on other people to help me out, especially with the language. The language barrier is so high that you have to depend on other people to help you, the official paperwork, all these kinds of things. Obviously, you have to think for yourself in many situations, but also you have that kind of obstacle. So did that experience also shape the person that you are right now professionally, and how to give advice and how to help people, depend on themselves?
For sure. There's so much I could say about that, particularly with language. But I've always been a really independent person.
Mm.
I've basically taken care of myself since I was a teenager. And obviously, I'm a literate person. I studied literature. So, like, moving to a country where, and I'm quite a capable communicator. So, moving to a country where it was difficult to communicate, couldn't read anything,
Mm.
it was very isolating, right? And I wasn't used to depending on other people.
Mm.
And also, it was the first time in a culture that was so different too, that, like America on the scale of things is like the most individualistic culture in the world. And then you move to East Asia and it's a lot more collectivist, right? It's a lot more group oriented.
Mm.
And there are those mistakes that you make in the beginning too, particularly when you're really young and assertive that if I went back and did it today, I would just like gasp at myself, like, oh my God, like bull at a China shop, like figure it out, right?
Mm.
But I think I did need those lessons. Like, how do you work together well with other people? Like, where is the line between your individual needs and being in a society that considers groups above all else. And how do you navigate those two things? And how do you become comfortable with accepting help and support from other people? So I really like it that you thought about that. And I do think that having those experiences myself directly has influenced the way that I support leaders, right? Because a lot of my clients who are not Japanese, I'll say, um, they struggle with that. Like they get really frustrated about being here. They're really capable people who suddenly like can't go to the post office or the doctor, adults like these things.
Mm.
And I think I was like this too. They're so used to being in control that they can sometimes avoid putting themselves in uncomfortable positions because they don't want to appear like less competent or and that's really natural, and I had to learn to get over that. And the beautiful thing on the other side of that, though, is that you understand an essential truth, which is that we actually all are interdependent, and it's okay to need help, and it's okay to get support. And I'll be the first one to give it to other people. So why on earth wouldn't I accept it
Mm.
from someone else? And so I think that's really also why I started adding in the community element of the work that I do as well, because I mean, this is cliche, but there's only so far that you can go alone, right? I will say that it also really motivated me to become better with language because there's
You
like,
have to.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully, I mean, there are people who live here for decades and decades who don't, right? And
Mm.
Japanese in particular, I know it's a really challenging language. But for me, I'm like, right, like I don't mind depending on other people when I really need it, but it's also my responsibility to become more autonomous in this situation, right? So that I'm not being overly dependent. So
Mm.
happily interdependent is sort of the sweet spot for me, and something that I would hope I support my clients with as well. Depends on the person.
Also, I think also like the line in which, I don't know, like you said, like moving from an individualistic country like the US to, Asia, which, it's more like we instead of I kind of
Mhm.
thing. Uh, there's a certain balance that that I think as internationals working in Japan or in Asia, we can bring by, I don't know how to say it, like negotiating the line in which, you're bringing this new mentality of being an individualist, to a team. And I think it helps a lot. It helps career wise so my job also, maybe this is why I'm trying to say, in my job I do a lot of communication between Japan and our international operations, and I see how it is, being in Japan helped me kind of understand how to negotiate with people who are way too individualistic, while also being independent when working with Japanese, colleagues. Because over here, sometimes, being the whole group mentality kind of deters, I don't know how to say, like, people kind of want the harmony, and that kind of affects the progression of a project. So you don't want conflicts, and then you end up not being able to proceed with the project, right?
Yeah,
I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say.
totally. I mean, I work with a lot of the people that I work with are innovators and
Mm,
builders. And
mm,
um, yeah, I think there is that advantage, right? To having both, and especially when you live here for a long time, you sort of have both minds to a certain extent.
mm,
But innovation and creativity can't really happen without conflict and without diversity.
mm,
And so I think, first of all, it's totally impossible to ever be totally like assimilated to Japanese society because of how we look and how we speak.
yeah,
That's just part of it. That
yeah,
like it's so categorical here that
mm,
you are so different from everyone else. And even though the foreign population is increasing, we're still like a huge minority. So like we
yeah,
just automatically get put into the other category. And that's
mm,
a really wonderful position to be in sometimes, as long as
mm,
you're not too far over here, right? If you're
mm,
connected, and I do think it's possible to integrate here,
mm,
but assimilation, and I wouldn't want to either, right? Like,
mm,
I think, I love myself and who I am and where I'm from and all the experiences that I've had. And I also think that with my difference, I do bring a lot of value. Learning how to communicate across that and collaborate and know sort of like how to push and when to like, accept, like that requires a little bit of nuance, but
mm,
I totally understand what you're saying. So for the purposes of innovation, we need
mm.
conflict and we need diversity. And the cool thing about diversity is that it naturally brings conflict. So
The cool thing about diversity is that it naturally brings conflict.
it does, it does. Like whether people are openly engaging with it or not is,
Mm.
I mean, if you're different with people, at some point you're just gonna,
Yeah, yeah,
all you're gonna collide, or someone's gonna communicate in a way that, maybe the other person doesn't fully land, or
mm.
um, it's just gonna happen. The cool thing about that is you can learn how to do conflict well.
Right,
And it
right.
doesn't have to be unhealthy, right? I was doing a leadership retreat with a team the other
Mm,
day. Normally, mostly Japanese teams, like the conflict is under the surface. It happens anyway, but
mm,
it's like, hidden, or it's not being communicated directly. And this team really surprised me. They were very comfortable with conflict, but they were all so respectful of each other when they were doing it. We managed
mm,
to go through so much. We covered really like a lot of ground with what they needed to do for this year and the next 5 years because they
mm.
didn't shy away from it. And so I really appreciated about that because it gave me a lot of hope for like what will happen in the future here in Japan. But yeah, they were a great example of what conflict done well, actually.
So
So
this, yeah, what you said, like it's usually done indirectly, like not in a very direct way. And from my, from working here for, like, I don't know, got my PhD here, and then I start working in the industry, and usually conflicts are never direct. Like this is like when you said that, like that's not so Japanese, to be honest.
yeah,
Because even in things that, and sometimes in meetings that we need a decision to be made, and if it's too direct, then they would just put it off. put off the whole thing till other meetings or I don't know what. So, what is? I mean, obviously, this leaves sometimes the situation to be quite uncomfortable, right? When there's conflict or unresolved conflict. Uh, what's the most uncomfortable thing about this job? About this the career path that you took, other than these kinds of conflicts?
Um, I think learning how to, well, there are two things. First of all, I'm an entrepreneur, and
Mm.
that's quite risky. As you
Yeah.
can tell, I'm not a risk averse person. Naturally, I just decided to move to a foreign country, you know, not totally on a whim, but it was less considered than I think more risk averse people would take, and I totally get that. And I think there's a lesson there. I've definitely learned to slow down my decision as I've gotten older. But I think so, so that just general, like, there's that belief that there's this stability, you get the job and you do this. And when you decide to go into business for yourself, you give that up, right? And I will say that like we're looking at unprecedented layoffs, particularly in the tech industry. And so I think people are really coming to terms with the fact that particularly in this age, in this economy, in our current economic systems, that idea of like you graduate university, you get a job, you work there for life, that's continually challenged because we're finding out that, at the end of the day, while that might be more, like relatively more stable than going into business for yourself, it's not a guarantee. And so I think that a really big thing about that was kind of unlearning that story of this idea that there is one correct path that I need to take, and understanding that there are risks involved with whatever I do, right? But when you're an entrepreneur, you have freedom and you have autonomy. And for me, that feels slightly less risky than, just sort of I think waiting for, something to happen. That being said, I do work in organizations as well, so I have a balance of both
Mm.
at the moment. That's one. The other one was one of the things like that you learn as a coach is that when I have a client in front of me and I'm choosing to work with them, I have it's my responsibility to hold a vision of them that is powerful, that is creative, that is dynamic. Basically, that is the fulfilled version of what they're trying to become in life or what they want to become. And I hold space for that with them as they, take the steps that they need to get there. And I think one thing is like really slowing down and understanding that, like, how can I put this? Everyone moves at their own pace. And my job is to accelerate them towards that. First of all, we understand why they want to become,
Mm.
that version of themselves. That's the foundational work because sometimes, I mean, I've spoke about this on Lee Jean's podcast, but sometimes um, the thing that you want to do or the person that you're trying to become or the leader that you're trying to become is driven by motivators that are not necessarily positive, like they're driven by anxiety or past experiences that
Mm.
just kind of make it so that you're pushing yourself for something that you don't really want on a deep level. So understanding what that is first is really crucial. But then I'm here holding space for like the most, fullest version of people. And that takes a lifetime to unfold sometimes. And so really like working at the pace that works with my client that is accelerating more than they could do on their own, but also is not sort of destructive to
Mm.
themselves. It's too fast, if that makes sense. And so I
Mm.
think that learning that balance and really being with my clients in that
Mm.
process in a way of like, okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. Like we
Mm.
just want to be closer to what it is. I think that was a skill that was uncomfortable because um, that involves two sets of skills. Number one, challenging people more than you would in daily life. Like when I
Mm.
have a client in front of me and they're not sticking to the things that they really want to do, it's my job to surface that for them. And it's very possible that I could offend their ego and they could fire me, which means that I don't, I might not get paid or whatever it is, or that client is
Mm,
unhappy here. So that like even taking that risk, right, to challenge people. And of course, there's a way to do it, and you build a rapport before you do it. That's not something that you do in daily life most of the time.
mm,
And you know, on the other hand, also
mm,
learning not to be too challenging and to respect each person's kind of like pace of growth,
mm,
right? There's a delicate balance there. And I won't say it was bad, but it was definitely uncomfortable to learn.
mm,
And it's different person to person too. So it creates you have to create a lot of situational awareness. And
mm.
as you're learning to do this, you're also working with people, right? And so it's like,
Yeah.
want to talk about not failing,
Mm.
people's um, selves are on the line, their identity and their exploration. There's a lot of trust that happens in a coaching relationship. When it's executives and founders, their company is on the line as well. So it's also a lot high stakes situation.
Do you, I mean, you mentioned something about, having trusting yourself and being an entrepreneur is a lot more comfortable than, having to basically work for organizations, which, still, like you said, you have a good balance there, right? From your perspective right now, many people are, I mean, I don't know, but the people that I know are all gradually becoming more interested in being independent as compared to working for organizations. Especially, I think AI is really accelerating this process. Everyone sees that most organizations are laying off people. Um, you know, uh, how do you think as a coach, how do you advise people to reconsider their careers uh, as of um, being is independent always or entrepreneur is always the best way to proceed for everyone or no, right?
No.
It's not for everyone. So what's the point that you give advice like, no, this is better for you or that is better for you? What is there like a certain quality that you see in the person that you decide on or like you give your advice on?
What's funny is that, and I
Mm.
think this is the thing that people hate about coaching. I don't give advice. Um,
Okay.
if I'm talking to my friends, I'll give
Mm,
advice. If I'm mentoring someone and the situation is like very clear, like I'm mentoring you, I'll
mm,
be more free in giving my advice. But more and more as I develop my skills as a coach and grow as a human being,
mm,
um, unless you're a consultant talking about a very specific thing that you have subject matter expertise in and domain knowledge in, and that is exactly what your client needs, I don't think advice is terribly useful, to be honest. So the coaching approach is more like asking questions and helping you explore so that you can give yourself the advice. And sometimes that does go with learning, with research, with understanding it. But at the end of the day, your life is your life.
mm,
So if anyone is giving you advice, it's going to be based on their life and their experience. And yes, their knowledge as well, but it may or may not work for you. So when someone is considering, I've coached people into starting businesses. I've also coached people out of entrepreneurship and back into full-time employment because that was the right thing for them at that life stage. So how we do it is, again, we start with that, you know, who are you and why? Why do you want to do this, right? What is it? What are the motivators? And then once we get to the who are you and the why, then we talk about, okay, how are these, what is it you want to make and how are these different ways that you can do it? And if the circumstances align or if it, ultimately feels right to the client, then they might go into entrepreneurship, but they might decide like, you know what, my life itself and all of these other areas are too unpredictable right now. So if I make that push into becoming an entrepreneur, my chances of success are lower just because I don't have the support or, like the runway to do this or like a backup plan. So I
Mm,
really help, and that's why I don't just call it like business coaching, what I
mm,
do,
mm,
because you're a human before you're anything else. And obviously, right, we're both human and we're different professionals. But if there are things in your life that make it very hard for you to be an entrepreneur, then that's really like something worth knowing before you make that decision. So rather than advice, I would call it more like curious exploration and helping you find that I don't want to say confidence, like courage to trust your own decisions, of course, within the realm of like exploring all of the different possibilities. And a coaching conversation gives you the space to do that. It also creates accountability for you to go out and do your own research. And you might talk to different people, and those people might give you advice, and it might be very good advice. But the coaching place is a space for you to come back and say, okay, how do I feel about this advice? Is this good advice for me or
mm,
not, right? And so having a skilled guide can be someone it can be really helpful in terms of like helping you sort through that, right? Because
mm,
when you're in this like space that like a very gooey space that most of us are in now, with the changes in the world so much,
mm.
um, there can be a lot of noise, right? And so the signal has to come from inside, and my job is to help you find the signal, basically.
This is very interesting. I've always thought of this is that everyone could give you advice, right?
Mhm.
Everyone. And everyone has something to say, especially nowadays. Everyone has got their own opinion. Everyone's got something to say. Everyone has got their own view on this world that we're living in. But honestly speaking, this advice is not usually the best for you, right? Like it's based on their perspective on how they're seeing the world. So what you just mentioned right now is just being a coach helps you make your own decision just in a clearer way. Is yeah, this is actually incredible, and I don't know how you guys do that, but obviously, like this is an incredible how can I say it? It's necessary for people to be able to think for themselves and to find people like you who help them, find exactly what do they want to do. So, um, uh, it was very interesting to hear you put it in words. And I think, speaking to Brandon earlier, also he mentioned something like that. I understand now a little bit clearer about what coaches do, because honestly, I didn't know what coaches do, to be honest, until very recently. Uh, I want to ask you about the some of the things that you struggle with, uh, or maybe you struggled with in your career development until you reached this stage that you're in right now. We talked about things that you were uncomfortable with, but what were like some challenges, let's say, that you had until you figured out that you want to do this for a living or to coach for a living? Because you said like you were in Atlanta and then you decided to go to Korea and then you taught English and then obviously you were helping people, but was there a part that you really struggled with? Like what were the things that you struggled with during this you know career journey?
Lots of things.
Mm.
I when you were asking me that question, I was like, well, your career is boring if you're not struggling a little. Like, there's
Yeah.
always something you're tussling with because growth is not comfortable, right? Like, we're just not wired to want to change. Some of us are more
Mm.
comfortable with it than others, but our nervous systems, neurologically, we're quite elegant for just kind of existing, right? Like that's kind of the gravity that pulls all of us in a certain direction. So the struggle part of it is the impetus that allows you to break down the muscle to build up a stronger muscle, basically. And so some of the struggles that I've had, um, I think, the first one we talked about it before was, culture.
Mm.
If Korea and Japan are also very different from each other, which, I didn't know much about Japan before I traveled here on holiday when I was living in Korea. And because I'm from the US, like we have regions, but if you go from like the distance from Japan to Korea, you're going to be like in a similar culture, right? That's
Yeah,
it. It's
probably
going to be in
yes.
the US, right? But
Yeah.
then when I came to Japan on a boat, I was like, oh my God, Japan is vastly different from Korea. So, adjusting to two cultures that are similar enough to be siblings, but just very different from each other.
Can
That was,
can I interrupt you over there?
yeah.
What what clicked or what happened that made you decide to move from Korea to Japan?
I think it was the peace of Japan. It's quieter here. It's more orderly here. Korea is amazing and energetic and has like a really young vibe. Japan feels more mature. And I think that might have been, and I mean, there's a lot of history there, for sure. And I want to acknowledge that too between the two countries because I love both of them.
Mm.
And so, I guess for where I was and what I was building and what I was seeking, Japan made more sense for me. But I remember the moment where I really felt the difference is it was on a bus no, sorry, a streetcar in Hiroshima, actually. And
Mm.
someone bumped, I was obnoxious, like an obnoxious source, like massive backpack, and I'm on a streetcar and it's crowded because it's like the commuting hour. And of course, I'm totally oblivious to this because I'm just on holiday. And, this kind of like middle-aged woman bumped into me and she said, "Sumimasen." And I didn't speak Japanese at that time, but I understood that that meant excuse me because of her demeanor and the way that it happened. And on a bus in Korea, no way will someone apologize if they bump into you. Like older women would like get on with their elbows out like this and like push to get like into the space, right? Because they're like, I've got to like make this space for myself. And there's like a power to that. And I hope that like part of my personality as I get older, retains that power. But for me, like day to day, I was like, I think I would rather be living in a place where someone apologized if they bump into me. Now, again, like I live in Tokyo, I live in Hayama now, actually, but I'm in Tokyo all the time, and I won't say that people
Where's
apologize to
Hayama?
me.
I'm not.
It's close to, do you know where Kamakura is?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's close to Kamakura. It's about 1.5 stops away from Kamakura on the coast.
that's
Um,
really nice.
oh, it's beautiful. I really like
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I'm really lucky to live out there.
Mm.
But yeah, I'm in Tokyo pretty much every day. And, it's obviously Tokyo is a unique place in Japan itself. But I think that moment of like where someone said, "Excuse me," I was just like, right.
That's why you moved.
I think that was like the first domino.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So going back to the struggles or the things that you
Cultural adjustment
else.
was one. Of
Mm.
course, language is one too, because my mother language is not the majority language here. And so working with clients, right? Like if I only use English, that limits the people that I can talk to. Of course, I coach mostly online, so I can work with any English speaker who fits my client profiles. But learning how to use Japanese as well or be comfortable with Japanese with some of my clients, that was a big struggle because so much about coaching is like deep understanding.
Mm.
And if there's a language barrier, then that can be really challenging. There is actually like a disruptive factor of coaching in a different language if you're the coachee, because
Mm.
it allows you to think in different ways, which can be quite useful. But still, I'm a really empathetic person, so if the other person isn't understanding or they're getting frustrated, of course, like I naturally sort of feel that. So that was a struggle too, to learn how to be comfortable with that. Um, I think the biggest struggle was, yeah, I was married when I left the US and Japan. And so I um had when I first started my business, like, that was very disruptive to my relationship. And this is something that's really important, I think, for entrepreneurs to know, is that when you take that risk, it's really important to have like full buy-in from the people around you. And sometimes, like people can be fully on board with that instability, like you yourself as a couple or a family, can really be on board with it. But other times, it, there's no way to know what it's going to be because the entrepreneurial journey is so unpredictable. So that's not the only reason why we didn't stay together, but I think that that was a big destabilizing factor. And so there was a struggle even when it came to building my business, right? When all of this stuff is happening in your personal life and you're building, and my job requires like a lot of emotional labor too. So like, how do I care for myself while all of this stuff is going on at home so that I can be fully, present with my
Mm.
client? And leaders have this too, right? So it- you
I've
know, that was
I've
I think the biggest struggle. Yeah.
I've and it's I don't know, it's quite I don't know if I can say, but like entrepreneurial lives, or basically if you're trying to do something, like let's say, that requires advanced, like a big commitment of yourself, then it's like eventually it really affects your personal life.
Yeah.
um I think I mentioned that I came here for my PhD, and many of my colleagues who were single getting into the PhD program left the PhD program still single, and they still struggle in the relationships or kind of finding a partner, because the amount of time that you spend committing to this project, and I think entrepreneurship is definitely the same, or probably maybe even more, it kind of it doesn't balance well with having a partner. Does I'm or at least not every partner would be on the same page when it comes to dedicating these incredible amounts of time just working on these projects. Does that resonate or with you
Yeah.
or no?
I think the right partner can really accelerate you, of course. But
Obviously,
the
yeah.
wrong partner creates a lot of drag in a lot of ways. And not it just, of course, in your life and your mental health, in the impact of your business. So, it's like the right partner, amazing, or no partner. Uh,
Right. Yeah.
but it is hard. And I think that's one of the things that I want to support entrepreneurs with, because I do think it's important to have solid relationships. And sometimes,
But if I can interrupt you there, but finding the right partner, generally speaking, is difficult, isn't it? Not just in these situations. So having the right partner,
but
also that in these kinds of situations, even a bit of a more difficult task, don't you think?
I don't know. I mean, there are two ways to look at it. One is like it's definitely the right partner if they're with you.
Yeah.
It's a good filter.
Yeah.
But it does take energy, right? Because like finding the right partner, we often talk about finding a partner, right? And
Mm,
I'm of the school of thought that like you build a partnership with someone. So there's
mm,
certain values or alignments that you have together that give the relationship potential.
mm,
But I don't think that you ever find someone who's like 100% perfect for you. And then it just magically is this wonderful support. I mean, you have a partner, right? It's not it's
mm.
not easy all the time. It takes energy and effort. And when it works well, it's completely worth it, right?
True.
But I do think so. We have this image of like entrepreneurship takes huge amounts of time commitment. That is true, and it isn't.
Mm,
I think again that goes back to the why of entrepreneurship. Like some people are using their business to avoid something inside of themselves that they don't want to face. And so the amount of time that they're dedicating to their project is a coping mechanism, right? It's a way for them to avoid something going on. And so they're choosing that. And it's not a conscious choice, but it is a choice, right? They're choosing that. And so I actually do think that it is possible to build a business and have a life. And so, like, that's one of the things that I want to support
Mm,
people on. I'm like, yes, there are seasons of hustle
mm,
for sure. And like having a strong foundation with the people around you and like solid communication skills and respect and empathy and like proper, self-care, even if it's micro self-care because you're busy, these things really help. So it is possible to be an entrepreneur and have good relationships. But at the same time, like there is that process there. And so
mm,
I do want to have people examine that. um,
mhm,
it's a big commitment. It's all of this, it's all of this time. And I'm like, yes, but does it have to be? Right. And sometimes the answer is yes. And
mm,
sometimes the answer is, oh no, actually, I was just really uncomfortable with this thing, or I'm anxious. And so I'm trying to influence the impact of this by putting more effort into it. But actually, what I really need is to like go hiking or like do something else for a little while, and the solution is
mm,
going to come to me like laterally. And
mm,
so like that depends on the person, right? And generally it does feel like a bigger risk commitment than for other things.
mm,
But yeah, I don't know that I like to say like hustle is important sometimes, and I've got it. Like grind is about survival. And so what is the line between like hustle and grind, right? And I've coached and supported and have been friends with a lot of PhD candidates, and there is a grind in that as well. So I actually don't know if it's easier than entrepreneurship. It definitely doesn't seem like it to me from the outside.
I mean, both are terribly difficult. I think like both both are not a fun. Like this podcast thing that I'm doing is kind of a thing, that project that I'm working on, and it's exhausting for me, to be honest. It's the
Mm.
like I understand, and this is something that I do on my free time, right? uh, Dedicating your full time to being an entrepreneur and starting something from nothing is, yeah, definitely not an easy feat. But PhD also is insane. So I don't know which one is more difficult, to be honest. Uh, I would like, so going back to, turning points, or things that changed with you. You said that the moment you were on the bus kind of, it was the start of the domino effect, right? Uh, Career wise, was there like a turning point that you had, that you were thinking like, okay, my career is going, and I'm talking about generally speaking, not just when you're in Korea or you're in Japan or like maybe back in the US. Was there a point that you were like, and I think you kind of talked about it a little bit, when your career was going in one direction, you were like, okay, I need to make a change. I need to do something different.
Yeah.
Maybe the first one that you mentioned was when you were back in the States and you were just trying to figure things out and then decide to move to Korea. But after that, was there also like a eureka moment that you were like, okay, like I want to be doing this instead of, continuing on the path that I'm in?
Yep. So I've experienced burnout twice in my life, which is one of the reasons why I support like burnout prevention and burnout recovery.
I live in burnout.
You're functionally burnt out.
Like, I think, yeah. When people say like burnout, I'm like, yeah, I think I've been in the burnout state for the longest time that I've known. It's
Yeah.
just like pushing through it, kind of, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean that I'm
Uh,
definitely, of course, like have so many
yeah,
questions about that. Uh,
yeah,
we can talk privately. No.
yeah. Maybe, yeah. That's a separate thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but there's a stage of burnout where you can't push through anymore.
Yes.
And I think that what I've noticed about the situation both times is there was a period of dissatisfaction where I wasn't quite sure, and I talk a lot about liminality, like being in between states, where I was sure that there was something that was not working for me anymore in what I was doing, but I wasn't sure what the next thing was. And so I was operating from this place of like dissatisfaction, but I had all this narratives about like, don't take the risk, right? Even though I have before, like we've done that before, you don't know what it is, what do you do? Da, da, da. So going through that, I think I really pushed myself too hard, right?
Mm,
And I ended up burnt out, and you have like physical symptoms and all of this stuff, and you get to the point where you're almost like unable to do anything. And fortunately, like I've never gone into such a profound state of burnout that I had to take like significant amounts of time off. It probably
mm,
would have been better if I had that option, right? Or I had given myself that option. But life is life, and if you're working in a company that gives you generous mental health leave, you can do that. But not everyone has that ability to do so, right? And so each time that was it. There was this dissatisfaction and there was this like tickle of like, this is not right, right? Okay, but what is next? And so that happened when like before I moved to Tokyo, because I had been teaching English for a while at that point.
mm,
And I was like, I know I don't want to do this anymore, but I don't know what to do. And so then when this opportunity came to start, doing program management and program directorship stuff, I took it because it was a way to try on a different version of my identity. And this is something that I coach clients on too about like how identity and transitions like intersect, right? And what is the process of doing this and in a way that helps you avoid burnout and is fun actually because I don't know. You said earlier that entrepreneurship like doesn't look fun. I think it is fun. It's just hard. And if it's not fun,
yeah.
then oh man, we've got to talk about that. Like,
Yeah, yeah. Maybe I misspoke. I did not mean not fun, but it's definitely not easy to do.
yeah, no,
Or
not
or everyone would have been doing it, right? Like if
yeah,
it was easy, right?
yeah.
Mm.
Okay, good. So fun is like a huge part of all this stuff.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, so I think those two burnout experiences taught me, okay, like start to pay attention. And also the process of my marriage ending too, like start to pay attention when there are those like glimmers of okay, like it's time for a change, it's time for something new. And if, I didn't have a coach in either one of these experiences, which is why I really wish I had, like,
Mm,
and I think that it really helped me having coaching and support these past years actually not get burnt out again and go through the difficult process of being an entrepreneur. Um, yeah, so I think there were those moments where I'm like, yeah, something needs to happen, and it usually starts as like a slow kind of a whisper or a feeling or a dissatisfaction, and then it through a process, whether it's like burnout, and then the recovery from that, or a moment on a bus or a bit of inspiration, things settle into place,
mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
that can happen accidentally, that serendipity, or you can actually intentionally activate that
Mm.
through a process of exploration. And I'm more of a fan of the second one now. I mean, like serendipity is beautiful. I love it. Like, don't get me
Mm.
wrong.
But you
But
can't just wait for it, right? Sometimes.
no, no, and I don't, who wants to be burnt out again? Like
Yeah.
why not take a more like creative stance in your life, do
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Last few, I think, two more questions, and I'll leave you to your to enjoy your day. One is, if you would start again, if you start all over again, what would have been the steps that you would take differently, or you would do the exact same thing all over again?
Uh Yeah, I mean the answer is both because obviously I can't end up where I am now if I didn't take the steps that I took, and I think I've been really honored to do some things. But
Mm,
if I were to give my younger self some advice, I would say that it would be create more stability before starting a business.
mm,
Um, I it would have made it, I would say, like a little bit easier for me. I
Mm,
don't think I would be as good of a coach as I am without the adverse circumstances that I've had. So that's why it's a little bit tricky to answer. But
mm,
aside from that, when I do coach other coaches, but most of my clients they're in different industries. Most of them are in tech or in creative industries. And it's like,
mm,
yes, do it, but start it as a side thing. Validate before, unless you have like generational wealth or you're willing to take the risk of like working with investors, then definitely validate it first. So that's what I would have done, I think, and just created a little bit more of a stable
mm,
foundation for myself, independent of, sort of my relationships and all of those things. Particularly for women entrepreneurs, I really suggest that. Like, make sure that you have, your own like runway that is
mm,
entirely yours, because becoming an entrepreneur is going to test your entire life in ways that are surprising and unexpected. And you can't
mm,
be totally prepared for that, but there are certain things that you can do to prepare and
mm.
validate before you even take that step. So that's what I would do differently.
Just a follow-up question, and sorry, this is one more.
Yeah.
You said like especially for women entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
What are the what are the difficulties that women entrepreneurs face compared to, just, entrepreneurs in general?
It's true for like most professions. We have to work harder to be taken more seriously. Um, Women receive only like 2% of investments compared to their male, like women-founded companies compared to their male counterparts, even though women consistently outperform their male counterparts in similar fields by about 60%. Actually, women-led or women co-owned companies tend to perform much better. And this goes back to diversity as well, right? And how like it can really be a strength. Um,
Mm,
so we're less likely to get funded. Um, we're more likely to be, when we walk into a business networking event, we're more likely to be seen as someone junior rather than an executive. Um, Oh, so socially, we tend to be less economically empowered than our male counterparts. So, a lot of the women entrepreneurs that I know, part of their strategy is also relying on their partner's income,
mm,
which can be okay. And I don't like totally discourage this. Like if your partnership is strong, and if you have backups for like what happens if, for example, like let's say your marriage is strong, but your partner suddenly sadly passes away or something happens, right? So having that independence that women tend to have a little bit less than men, or actually extremely less than men in a lot of cases, is particularly important because if you're already in a socially disempowered position, the risk is heavier for you. And so it's really important to care for yourself in that situation.
in Japan also, like that's quite a thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And does how did sorry, did that affect your business, generally speaking? Because see, I'm from the Middle East, right? I'm from Yemen, and we are known to, well, it's known that in the Middle East, like women are not as empowered as men, right? But from what I've seen, like that there, especially recently, there have been like huge steps in, empowering women. Moving to Japan, which I thought like in my head, I thought like Japan is already, one of the first world countries. I thought it would be more equal, when it's not. In fact, like anyone who's been here, and I think most studies and stats that you've seen like show like the great discrepancy between men and women. How is it? How difficult is it for women entrepreneurs, especially in Japan, compared to, other countries?
Well, most of the women entrepreneurs that I work with are Japanese women, and yeah, I mean they're definitely swimming upstream in some areas. There's a huge problem here with like investor harassment as well, which is something that my colleagues have been actively fighting against. Um, Yeah,
What is investor harassment?
it's basically where investors expect sexual favors in return for investing in the company.
So
And
it's
that,
sexual harassment
yeah,
by
yes,
investors.
yes, yes. And I mean, it's like you see this in the news all the time with like powerful men in Japan. It's like everywhere, but particularly in Japan. And then it comes out and it's still really, it's something that we're starting to talk about more here, which is one of the reasons why I like working in Japan, because I think we have the most room to grow. So you can really see the impact, right? Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a global problem. Same with like my women I know and my clients who are non-Japanese. Some of them like they had really, fantastic corporate careers before. And they also have a partner that is earning like international salary money within Japan, or they have a Japanese partner. And so there is that same system of like, and my partner is also supporting my business, which
Mm,
is great. Like again, if it's a strong partnership, that can be such a boon.
mm,
And I do think that that's one way that partners can really contribute to diversity in the business world in particular, because we are coming from a place where, we're paid still like 75% or less than 75% of what men are paid. So starting out, we're already, unless we're a rare case, we're already starting from a, like, let's say like a less stable position. But particularly in Japan with gender norms, communication as well. Like if you're communicating in Japanese, there are ways that women speak and ways that men speak, and which
mm,
one is considered more powerful or persuasive or authoritative, If a woman speaks the way that a man speaks, like it's viewed very differently than if a man speaks that way. So particularly as a woman, with your executive presence, how do you do that in a way that is authentic to you and is still impactful, right? And
mm,
so, particularly for Japanese women,
mm,
my colleague Helen and I do a lot of work on that around how to be yourself, but also to, walk into a conference and on a global arena and be taken seriously as the executive you are. Like some of the women that we work with are high level in these huge international companies. And if you were to go into a room, before we started working with them, you wouldn't be able to tell that that's what they were doing, which is nice in some ways. Like humility is a value of mine as well, but also, it doesn't help your like let's say business outcomes if you're constantly
And
taken
I
less
think
seriously.
humility uh, is not to be mistaken for being underestimated,
Yes, exactly.
right? Like that's a thing also.
Yes.
Wow. Oh, thank you. This was an interesting detour. Okay.
Yeah.
Last question. If you could finish the following sentence. In this career, no one tells you that.
Ah, in this career, no one tells you that. How do I want to put this?
Did anything, you thought of something immediately, or you're still looking for the answer?
What's coming up is something like it's a wonderful career and it's a career. So there's this expectation that there's a financial exchange, but also in
Mm,
order to do it effectively, while you're connecting with clients, you have to let that go, right? Because you like obviously if there's an exchange for services, there's this thought about like, okay, I need to do a good job so my customer is happy, right?
mm.
So that I appeal to people. And actually part of my job as a coach is to make people uncomfortable, in touch, because that's what they come to me for. They're like, I'm dissatisfied. I would like a change, or something isn't working. Let's fix it. Or I want to build something new or transition to the state. And it's important that the financial exchange be there. But
Mm.
if you're relying on that solely, then it does make it hard to show up effectively as a coach.
So, in other words, in this career, no one tells you that. Uh, how would you put it in one sentence?
In this career, more than any other career, it absolutely cannot be just about the money.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay then.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. This is you know this was a very interesting conversation, and I appreciate the time that you gave us today. Thank you, and hopefully we'll have another conversation soon, more about not being burnt out,
Yeah.
all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. I would
Uh,
totally be down to talk about that.
okay then. Thank
Thank
you
you
very
for
much.
this today. I really enjoyed meeting you.